Hi, welcome to our preview sessions before we get to meet face to face. I'm Karen Bonanno and I've been working in the education sector for around 35 years. I started out as a secondary teacher and then progressed through a career path that provided lots of opportunities to work with teachers and students, but also to work with various education groups and professional associations. As the founder and managing director of EduWebinar, my main work is involved in planning and hosting webinars that cover primary and secondary education, with specific focus on innovative teaching and learning strategies, and also to looking at the resourcing that applies to the curriculum and how we can design that and deliver it. What I'm wanting to do here in these pre-conference videos is to provide you with a bit of background on the guided inquiry design framework. What I will do is explore the 8 phases of learning so that we can kickstart our thinking on how and when you would flip one or more of these phases. In a unit of work, you don't have to flip the whole unit. You might just flip one component of it so that the students can have the opportunity to do exploration of their own. This is the Guided Inquiry Design Framework, and it is designed to encourage students to take some ownership of their learning because they start to design the questions that they're going to explore. They are facilitated by you in the work that they're doing. And so if any of you have had any experience with design thinking, you'll see there's some similar overlap here. So for instance, in the first part there's that hook that gets kids in, then you immerse them so that they can develop their background knowledge, and then you can get them to start looking at, well, what is the question that they want to explore, then going through capturing the right information to support that, developing certain prototypes and getting the feedback, and then eventually sharing what they've learned, and then to reflect on that through some level of evaluation. The Guided Inquiry Design Framework is actually supported by research. The information research process describes how students process learning. It's been developed over several decades of research, and it mainly explored or investigated how students went through their thinking, what actions they were engaged in, how they felt while they were involved in extensive research projects. It identified things like when they were having difficulties, when they were experiencing success and what that meant for them, when they needed help, and what type of help was useful through that extensive research. The findings from the studies then provided the evidence on how to guide learning in an inquiry process, and that's how the Guided Inquiry Design Framework came about in 2012. It is important to realise that this type of framework does support good pedagogical practice. So this document comes from the Queensland Department of Education, and it looks at core principles that sit behind a pedagogical framework. Things like the student ownership, having high expectations by setting learning goals, aligning with the curriculum and general capabilities, being supported by validated research, embracing different teaching and learning strategies and rich information and resources to scaffold learning, and then to have a flexible and innovative and responsive learning space. So the Guided Inquiry Design Framework does address these particular core principles. The very first part of the first phase of learning is the open phase. Now, this is the process that begins the inquiry, and it sets the scene and the atmosphere. What you do need is to have a powerful opener to introduce the general topic to engage the students. You want that hook that gets them in, that will spark some discussion around the ideas, the themes, the concepts related to the particular topic or subject. At this stage, you're drawing on the personal experience and knowledge that the student has. So the type of thinking that happens here is called divergent thinking, and that involves brainstorming, mind maps, but it is a thought process used to generate lots of different ideas by exploring as many possible solutions. So it's quite spontaneous, free-flowing and non-linear. Then the next phase that I want to cover in this first session is the Immerse phase, and this is where there is immersion in the content. So here we've got a little swimmer and it's swimming through all the content. That content could be provided to them in a video, it could be reading an article or a book or a story, it could be listening to an interview, it could even be an excursion which could be live or virtual. The idea is that you're trying to guide them to connect to the curriculum content, but what you want to do is allow them to discover what they might like to explore further. You're tapping into what they already know, what it is that is of interest to them, they want to find out more. And so the thinking that happens here is the emergent thinking, the thinking process that looks for all patterns of interaction, of information, how things relate to each other. So what they're doing is they're trying to tease out the possibilities of what they can find in this immersion process, where they're just dipping in and finding out what's there. So here's some questions for you to reflect on for this particular first part. What we want to try and do is look at what activities lend themselves to being flipped, where you've got something that can happen outside the classroom, or it could be a combination. Initially it happens in, and then it's the flip part is what they might do outside the class. Now, when I say outside the class, I don't fully mean that it's something that they do at home. It could well be going back to the pedagogical framework of setting up learning environments that are responsive and interactive and innovative. You might actually have your classroom designed in a way that there's an in-class where it's a whole class, and then they go off individually to do something or groups to do something, and so it's still flipping the activity because it is allowing the students to take charge of what is actually happening for them to develop their knowledge and understanding. One point is we need to think about is what are you? What role are you? Are you a facilitator or a guide or a coach or a mentor? Because in this type of inquiry process, that's really a role that you play. The questions I've got here to reflect on is, what do you do to establish inquiry in your classroom, and how do you immerse your students? What I'm suggesting here is that you take an existing curriculum unit and then you identify and record the similarities and differences between your unit and the guided inquiry design framework. Now, what I've got here is some tools that can help you do that. The first one I've got is double bubble map. Now, as you see with that, in this circle here, you would put your unit of work, the title of it. In this circle here, you'd put guided inquiry design. And then you would note the differences between the two, and then look at where the overlap is and the similarities. Now, these websites here, I have included a reference list below, so you'll have them there to go back to, but they're different websites that actually provide this type of compare, contrast, distinguishing the similarities and differences. Another tool that you may have seen is the Venn Diagrams. It's the same. So in this field here, you'd put your title of your unit, you'd put the guided inquiry, you'd have the differences, and then you'd have where they overlap. The contrast T-chart is another example where you do that particular process. Again, here are some web links that are in your reference list below that you can go back to review some of the material that we're discussing. So that's the first session that I want to share with you. In the next video, I'm going to look at the explore, identify and gather phase. So we'll see you soon once you've reflected on this particular session and captured your material in the similarities and difference examples there.